Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of My Weight Live. Tonight, we're talking with Dr. Mary Forhan, the Scientific Director of Obesity Canada, about advocating for ourselves and getting the care we need. If it feels like you keep hitting roadblocks trying to get the support you need, this show is for you. Dr. Forhan, it's truly a privilege to get to speak with you tonight. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So, you're the Scientific Director of Obesity Canada, which is Canada's leading obesity charity. Tell us about Obesity Canada's mission.
So, Obesity Canada has been around for more than 16 years, and I was so fortunate to be a part of sort of the groundswell behind it. And so, our mission and values really haven't changed much over those 16 years, except to become more refined and I think more commonly known across Canada for sure, and hopefully nationally and internationally as well. And we really have a vision for a day when people affected by the disease of obesity are really understood, they are respected, and they're living healthy lives. And that's really a core mission that has been consistent through Obesity Canada. And our mission is really to work toward and with people living with obesity to improve the quality of life of Canadians living with obesity. And if it benefits beyond our borders, we're really excited about that as well.
So, we're dedicating this episode to the concept of advocacy, how important it is to advocate for our own health, and we'll certainly talk about that, but also why advocating on behalf of everyone living with obesity matters too. So, let's start off by talking about what advocacy is. How do you define it?
Well, I think advocacy, when we think about that, is really, having a goal to empower change and to influence policy, and doing that with and on behalf, and in our case, individuals living with obesity. So I think that's sort of the broader picture of advocacy.
We are going to take a quick break here and do our trivia question. If you answer tonight's question, folks, you will get an awesome guide to having a productive conversation with your doctor about weight. It's a checklist that helps you think through what to bring to the appointment, the questions to ask, and more. And you'll get it for free if you answer tonight's question, which is, true or false, obesity is a chronic medical condition. Is that true or false? Is obesity a chronic medical condition? Put your best guess in the comments and you will get that handy checklist delivered to your Facebook Messenger inbox. Dr. Forhan, in 2020, the Canadian Adult Obesity Clinical Practice Guidelines were released, which was a very big deal globally, and Obesity Canada played a really important role in developing them. So tell us, what should the people watching at home know about the guidelines and why they matter?
From the beginning, there were core values that were instilled in our advisory team in terms of what we wanted the guidelines to be. Who are they for? And they were originally started to be for the medical network. So for primary care teams and networks and physicians to really help provide some guidance on evidence-based interventions and approaches. But we wanted more. We wanted more than, how to treat obesity and what the best science is behind that. So that's certainly a core part of the guidelines. But we also wanted to provide that lived experience. So what was incredible is that, it didn't take much call at all to reach out and ask for people to participate, to share their stories, and also to guide the authors. So every chapter, and I believe I should know this off the top of my head, but I think there's 16 to 18 chapters. There might be a couple more. Every chapter had a individual living with obesity who was part of that team. So each chapter in the guidelines also has a section or recommendations that's geared towards patients, that they can take this advice when they are visiting with their family physician or their primary health care team. So it's bringing information to the visit, to the appointment. Some of it might be advocacy in nature and how to self-advocate and raise the conversation with your physician. There's also recommendations in each chapter that individuals living with obesity can take that science and apply it to their own lives. And to me, that's an incredibly unique component or aspect of the guidelines.
So there's a lot of conversation about an initiative that Queen Latifah is part of called It's Bigger Than Me, and it's really focused on combating weight stigma and bias. And folks, we will link to that in the comments if you'd like to learn more. And it's wonderful to see that, as the stigma associated with obesity often keeps people from advocating for themselves. Talk about the work that Obesity Canada is doing and has been doing for a long time around reducing weight bias and why this is so important.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've started with influence education that healthcare professionals are getting. So trying to get into the curriculum in programs across Canada and really using, there's some great resources that have been developed by numerous scholars and educators across the world, really, and pulling those into to curriculum. We're also really trying, and I think doing quite well at trying to influence policy. So making connections between the impact of weight bias on economy, on social health in communities, on the experiences as individuals, and how weight bias impacts an individual, but then also has an impact on that individual's ability to access health care. And when we block access to health care, what we're doing is actually creating more expense in the healthcare system. So when we can start to connect how weight bias impacts individuals, which is important and valuable, but where it starts to shift policies is where we start to see the impact on economics and participation in work and school and all kinds of things that are important for citizens to engage in. Weight bias can have catastrophic impact on the health of an individual, but the health of society as well.
So, quick question for you. Let's define weight bias for someone watching at home who might be like, what do they mean by weight bias?
Yeah, so weight bias is I mean, you'll see variations of definitions, but the core of it really is when beliefs and attitudes towards an individual are developed and applied simply based on a person's body weight.
So, for example, if I were to believe that people who have a body a certain size are, X, Y, or Z, if those things are negative, then that would be a simple example of weight bias.
Absolutely. And as simple as that is, if as a healthcare professional, just by way of example, we know this to be true in the literature, is if I have a perception that an individual living in a large body or an individual living with the disease of obesity, and they're two different things sometimes, one does not always mean that the disease of obesity is there. If I have an expectation that that individual is lazy or not intelligent, it's going to change the way in which I interact with that individual. My expectations are going to be lower as a healthcare professional. I may simplify the information that I share. I may withhold information that I share. Obesity Canada is really working. We're not the only ones doing it, but we're really proud of the work that we're doing, is making sure that anything that we do, we are looking at the impact of weight bias and opportunities to influence that or make a change.
So let's say that a person is working with a doctor who hasn't come across the wonderful work of Obesity Canada and they do have some weight bias. How would you recommend that they advocate for themselves with that doctor if that's what they're experiencing?
Yeah, that's tough, right? It's tough when you're in a power dynamic relationship, particularly, if you're a patient and you're talking with someone who holds maybe a gateway to some information or services that you need. It's really important to be able to and we use this in any kind of conflict situation, is to raise with the individual the impact of their behavior or their assumptions on you as an individual. So, for example, we'll often encourage patients to say, it's interesting you're saying that my weight is all about me eating too much and not moving enough. And we might say, okay, well, that's the perception, that's the knowledge, is to be able to reflect back and say, I can appreciate why you might think that that is what's causing my obesity. But actually, I've learned from reading, let's say, at the Obesity Canada website, that obesity is actually not that simple and that there are more complexities. And as a patient, I'm really interested in learning a bit more about those complexities, as challenging as that may be. And I really need someone to work with me. And I hope that that will be you. So encourage people to reach out for resources, bring a family member, talk to somebody, prepare ahead of time. Yeah, they can be intimidating conversations.
Well, I love the
Yeah,
idea of bringing a family member because often just
yeah,
having that support, even if that person doesn't say anything. It is kind of, often I will have a conversation that I would kind of back out of it. But if someone's there, it's like, okay, I need to do this. I'm committing to myself. And you just kind of feel that silent support. And I do think that can make a big difference.
It really can. And sometimes it's just a matter of opening up the conversation. It may not be as bad as it's built up in your mind. And if it is, and I know this isn't easy to do with scarce healthcare resources, but find another practitioner. If it's not a good fit, find someone who's going to listen. And that may take some time, but it's worth it.
So I'm going to ask you a question I've been asking all of our guests of late, and that is, why is starting to treat obesity as early as possible so important for kind of our long-term health?
Yeah, I think it is, and at what point that is going to be very individual on an individual basis. And so if anyone's watching this or anyone's sort of thinking, well, I've been hesitating going and talking about this with my doctor, please go and have a conversation. It doesn't mean that you're going to come out with, oh, here we go. I'm going to be, handed a food guide and a diet and all of these things. I'm hoping that won't be people's experiences, that it'll be a conversation. It'll be developing a care pathway together with your healthcare provider, your healthcare team. And it's an important process to start early. Now, having said that, if you're watching and that's not something you've done and you've been putting it off, don't, beat yourself up about that. Don't be hard on yourself. Getting help at any point is really, really important. But when we're looking at primary prevention and management, that is important to get there soon.
Folks, if you're just joining us, we're here with the Scientific Director of Obesity Canada, Dr. Mary Forhan, and we're talking about the importance of advocating for ourselves. We're also giving away a guide to having a productive conversation with our doctor about weight if you answer tonight's trivia question, which is true or false, obesity is a chronic medical condition. Is that true or false? You've gotten a few spoilers up until now, but put your best guess in the comments and you will get that handy checklist delivered to your Facebook Messenger inbox. Dr. Forhan, Obesity Canada has a lot of amazing patient ambassadors, several of whom we've had the privilege of interviewing on this show. Tell us a little bit about what these ambassadors do to advocate for people living with obesity, and if someone watching at home is inspired to volunteer, how can they go about that?
Such great questions. So, and again, in case you haven't picked up on it, I'm incredibly enthusiastic about our partnership with people with lived experience. So in terms of roles of our ambassadors and members of our OC Connect community, so many roles. And so there's something for everybody. So as I'm a scientist, I'm a researcher. And so one of the ways that our ambassadors really help out is being part of research teams. So it's not uncommon for a researcher or scientist to reach out to Obesity Canada and say, I'm writing this grant, or I have this research question I want to develop, or I have a study I'm launching. I'd really like some people with lived experience as part of my research team. I've often worked with individuals as part of our OC Connect community to meet with politicians, with policymakers, with key stakeholders, making decisions about what's included on benefits packages for extended health benefits that we have in Canada. And so bringing an individual to tell their story, to talk about the importance of shifts in policy that might be to reduce weight bias, that might be to increase access to healthcare services or treatments. We'll bring individuals along with us and really partners on the team.
Wow, Dr. Forhan. Folks, if you are interested, and I don't know how you could not be after listening to that impassioned description, we will put a link to the Obesity Canada website where you can learn more. We're going to take a break here and play a video of several different patients, many of whom are Obesity Canada patient ambassadors, talking about their journey with weight. So we'll watch the video and then come back and keep talking with Dr. Forhan.
The story of my weight starts when I was very young.
I have been heavy my entire life. I was always the big kid in school.
When you're little and you don't fit into the school seat, or you don't fit into the chair at the doctor's office, and you know right away that you're different and that you just don't fit in this world.
I actually started my first diet when I was in grade 6.
Like most people that deal with weight issues, I've been on several different diets.
Dieting for so long, I felt like I had tried everything.
I did have periods where I had lost weight and had some success, but it always came back with a vengeance, and I was heavier than I had started.
It's my opinion and observations in my own life that diets don't work.
Diet culture has told us that we are responsible and that we can fix this if we just try hard enough, if we just pay that next fee, if you just sign up for the next subscription, and it's madness.
You know, I didn't like to eat it in front of people. I had feeling of very little self-worth, and it really led to a very isolating life.
I remember never being invited to the high school dance, never having a boyfriend through high school, all the things that as a teenager and as a child you just dream of and hope for just as a means of fitting in, and always knowing that I would never have that.
I got to the point where I didn't want to take the kids to school. I didn't want to go grocery shopping. I didn't want to be out in public at all. My kids were missing out on a lot because their mom was too embarrassed to go out in public. And that was my rock bottom.
There was a moment in my life where I really decided I needed to show up for myself in a different way. I was honestly just exhausted from feeling like a failure.
I've lost over 100 pounds. I've kept it off for 3 years, two or 3 years. And it's really interesting because I'm still fat. People who knew me heavier will come up and say, you look fantastic. And I see other people who didn't know me look at me like, what are they talking about? She's fat. Why are you telling her she looks so good? And I find that really interesting because I still think I look good. I still think I've done a fantastic thing. So it's changed not who I am, but it's changed how I am able to interact with who I am and what I do.
I think there's something to be said about the journey that I've gone on with my weight. It's actually empowered me to speak out and be the advocate that I am right now.
The biggest change for me came when I realized that I'm allowed to take up space. I'm allowed to be here.
Finding the right medical help and the right professionals that understand what you're going through is such a huge factor in tackling this problem.
Meeting a medical professional who listened to my cry for help changed my life.
I met a physician who got it and who understood it. That gave me hope. Up until then, I was just focusing on let's just lose all this weight. And then he just said, let's get you healthier. Let's just get you healthier. So I found somebody that understood it, and that made all the difference.
The Obesity Canada mission has two main components, Dr. Forhan: reducing weight bias and promoting evidence-based obesity care. So far, the access to obesity treatments is pretty limited in terms of insurance coverage. Why is that, and what is Obesity Canada doing to change that?
Yeah, it's better than it used to be. So we'll start on a positive. I don't want to, negate some of the progress, but we do have a long way to go. What Obesity Canada is doing is we are, as working with our ambassadors with Obesity Canada, is really trying to influence policy around access to building spaces and places that are accessible to people in large bodies, to be able to advocate with benefit companies, insurance companies, to include obesity treatments in their coverage, and to really show the evidence attached to the value of providing those services and the overall good that it's going to do for the workforce, for the community, for individuals' health. It's not just a nice thing to do, it's actually a necessity. And I think we're also really working hard at, destigmatizing obesity and making it seem, as it should, as a legitimate healthcare issue that is important to address and, quite frankly, shouldn't be a choice.
So true. And I have to say, my one thing that I'm taking away from this wonderful conversation is that things are changing. We're headed in a positive direction. It's long overdue, but we're getting there.
We are getting there. And I think, we've had these conversations around sort of the administrative table in the boardroom at Obesity Canada, is that we feel that we've gotten it to the point where obesity is recognized as a chronic disease. Not as much as maybe we'd like, but we feel we've spent a lot of our energy doing that over the past few years, and we've made some headway in that area. Now it's time for action. So let's stop debating whether it's a chronic disease or not. It is. So let's move on and let's treat it as such. Let's make choices and options available that fit with that chronic disease model, and those already exist. So let's have obesity as part of that.
Wow, Dr. Forhan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I so appreciate your very illuminating and inspiring perspective.
Oh, thank you so much, Ainsley. It's been just an absolute pleasure to be here.
A big thank you to everyone watching at home. Before we go, here's the answer to tonight's trivia question. True or false, obesity is a chronic medical condition? The answer is true. Unfortunately, it's not always treated by policymakers the way many other chronic diseases are, and that's what Obesity Canada and Dr. Forhan are working so hard to change. If you didn't get to answer the trivia question, but you'd like that guide to having a productive conversation with your doctor about weight, just leave us a comment and tell us what you thought of tonight's show. I will be back with you in a few weeks. Until then, please stay safe and take good care. Good night.